Today is our final sermon in our series on the Lord's Prayer. We have taken it phrase by phrase over the course of Lent, and on this Easter day, we will not neglect the word Amen. We know what Amen sounds like. We say it at the end of our prayers, at the end of sermons. Sometimes we even say it casually. Amen to that. And most of the time, we use it like a period, a way of saying, that's the end. Amen, it means yes. It means truly. Or this is firm. This is trustworthy. You can stand on this. Jesus speaks the word amen often in the Gospels. He often says, amen, 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 I say to you. And it's frequently translated as truly, truly, I say to you. Or the King James will say, verily, verily. In the Greek, that's amen, amen, I say to you. It means pay attention. This is true. The words I'm speaking are true. So what if amen, the amen to our prayer, what if it's not an ending, but a declaration? We know what the other word sounds like too. We know what the word no sounds like. If amen is yes, we also know the word no. It sounds like that high school senior who has done everything right, worked hard, gotten into their choice school, and still can't pay the bill. And the answer comes back, no. It sounds like the relationship that we long to mend, the conversation we rehearse, the apology we try to offer, and nothing moves. The door stays closed. No. It sounds like the person with a disability who wants to work, who is ready and capable, but no one will take the chance. Application after application, the answer is no. It sounds like the teenager who tries to speak honestly about their life, their questions, their pain, and is told, you'll understand someday. Not now, not yet, no. It sounds like the elderly neighbor who simply wants to get out of the house, to be here, to belong, but every step requires help. Every outing is complicated, and so more often than not, the answer is just to stay home. No. And if we're honest, we know what that sounds like and feels like in our own lives too. The prayer we've prayed that hasn't been answered, we hear no. The healing we hoped for that hasn't come, no. The door that has not opened, no. And beneath all of it, deeper than any one moment, any one disappointment, there is a deeper no. The no of the ways we wound each other, the harm we do intentionally and unintentionally, the words we can't take back, the systems we participate in, the violence we carry in our hearts. No. It's a no to many people. The no of a world that crucifies love when it appears, that rejects what is good, that fears what is true, that nails it to a cross. The world says no. And finally, the last word we know how to speak, death. The silence, the stillness, the end. The final no. And that is a word that has already been spoken when Mary comes to the tomb. The cross has said its piece. The world has rendered its verdict. No. Mary is not expecting resurrection. She is grieving. She comes in the early morning darkness. She sees the stone rolled away, but even that is not good news yet. She assumes the worst. They have taken him. Even when Jesus stands before her, she doesn't recognize him. Because when no has the last word, it reshapes how we see everything. It reshapes how we see everything in our world and in our lives. Until Jesus speaks her name, Mary. And suddenly everything changes. Not because she figured it out, not because she believed hard enough, but because Jesus knows her. The risen Christ doesn't begin with proof. He begins with a relationship. He calls her by name. And in that moment, the no that has defined her world is interrupted by a voice that refuses to let her go. And this is the resurrection. Not just that Jesus lives, but that he still speaks, still calls, and still knows us. And this is where amen becomes possible. Christ is God's living. Christ is God's living yes, spoken personally into the lives of those who thought the story was over. And we see glimpses of that amen even now. I remember a young woman in a congregation I once served. Her name was Miriam. And she had a very rare genetic condition that gradually turned her muscles into bone. And by her mid-20s, much of her body was fixed in place. She was brilliant, a graduate of Stanford, but now she lived on disability. And without realizing I was doing anything out of the ordinary, I asked her, "Would you consider teaching Sunday school?" I needed Sunday school teachers, and she seemed a possibility. She was a very animated personality, and I thought that she would do well with our younger children. And she looked at me. She was stunned. And she said, "No one has ever asked me to do that before." Because the world had already said no to her, quietly, repeatedly, and in ways that were often very quiet, simply not being asked to do something, not being asked to usher, not being asked to teach Sunday school, not being asked to sing in the choir, and turns out she loves to sing. It was not always cruel. It was not always effective, because she did have her ways of getting where she wanted to be. But so often she heard no. But on that day, something different was spoken. And it wasn't just a task, it was a calling. And she said yes, and she taught first grade. At first, the kids, they were nervous. They didn't want to come in the room. They were unsure about her and her chair. Some hesitated to come into the room and needed to be coaxed in. But Miriam, she charmed them and won them over. She showed them how her chair worked and how it would tilt to various sides to help her feel better. The tools that she used to pick things up, all the lights on her chair and its various features. And then slowly the fear turned to curiosity and then into delight. She expanded their world, their imagination of what a human life could look like. And Miriam, who had quietly carried the question of whether she was useful, whether or not she mattered, she found joy in these children. And it wasn't because her condition changed. It was because the word that was spoken over her changed. It went from no to something like, "You are needed. You are seen. You belong. Amen." If this were our story to write, the cross would be the end of it. The no would stand. So often we have trouble finding a new way, imagining a different outcome, finding a way to see yes, to hear yes, to say yes. But this is not our story to write today. And so we have Easter. Easter is God's amen to the world. It is God's yes in the face of every no. It's not a denial of suffering. It's not a pretending that death isn't real. It's a deeper truth that death does not get the final word, that love is not finished, that creation is not abandoned, that God doesn't give up on the world or the people in it. God continues to create and recreate. Easter is not just something that happened to Jesus. It is God's way of saying yes. Yes, the world still matters. Yes, you still matter. Yes, I am not finished with any of it yet. If the cross is the world's no, then Easter is God's amen. When the world says no to the student who longs to learn, God says, there is a future for you. Amen. Where the world says no to the relationship that feels beyond repair, God says, love is not finished yet. Amen. Where the world says no to the one who is ready and able but overlooked and unseen, God says, you are seen, you are called, you belong. Amen. Where the world says no to the voices of the young, God says, I am still speaking through you. Amen. Where the world says no to the elderly who long to be present, to be here, to belong, God says, you are not forgotten. You are a part of us. Amen. And deeper still, where the world says no through the harm that we would do to one another, God says, I am not finished with you. Amen. Where the world says no and crucifies love, God says, love will rise again. Amen. And where the world speaks its final word, where death says no, God says life. God says still. God says again. Amen. Easter is God's amen to the world. And now we are invited to live as people of that amen, to trust it, to speak it, to live it. Christ is risen indeed.